Right here. Great. Hey, I want to thank the media for coming out. I'm really honored to be here with Admiral Fagan. She is Commandant of the Coast Guard. By the way, a historic figure for our country. First woman to be Commandant of the Coast Guard, 4-star Admiral. First woman to be on the Joint Chiefs of Staff, which she is. And so it's great to have you here, Admiral. Thank you for your time. Another great visit in Alaska. Just a few words before I turn it over to the Admiral. Just last 8 days, I have spent with a lot of my team traveling throughout the state. We were in Fairbanks, we were in Delta Junction, Glen Allen, Valdez, Whittier, joined up with the Commandant at a great Coast Guard dinner in Anchorage. Then we went to St. Paul. We were at Kotzebue all day, and every single one of these places, I did town halls and big meetings with all the community. Every single place I was in the last 8 days, including with the Commandant, Alaskans were asking about these Russian, Chinese incursions into our water, into our air, and the #1 military service that has been protecting America's interests during all these incursions this summer, last summer, the summer before, is the Coast Guard. So what I've been doing with the Commandant and other leadership members of the Coast Guard and the subcommittee that I'm the ranking member of in charge of the Coast Guard in the Senate. By the way, if the Republicans win back the Senate, I'll be the chairman of that committee in charge of the Coast Guard for the United States. Is we've been working on recapitalizing the fleet in Alaska, making it bigger and more modern. So we have 6 fast response cutters. These are big cutters that are either already in Alaska or coming to Alaska. 2 what are called offshore patrol cutters. 2 new 87-foot patrol vessels. We're trying to keep the 110-foot cutter in Valdez. We have new C-130Js at our air station in Kodiak. We are getting new H-60s, the great helicopter platform. This is all the recapitalization we've been doing already. Doesn't get a lot of press. We've spent over $600 million in infrastructure for Alaska to support these new assets. And then the real big new asset that the Commandant announced officially just 2 days ago is a commercially available icebreaker that we are going to buy. The Coast Guard has the authorization and the money now to buy. We worked on that really closely with the Commandant, Senator Murkowski, and we're going to home port that in Juneau. So that was the big announcement that the Commandant just made. So Alaska is going to have an icebreaker. We've been working on this for decades. The place in the Arctic for America needs an icebreaker, and we are going to get one. So I want to thank the Commandant. The other thing she and I have been doing in the last few days with her team is laying out a strategic laydown of future Coast Guard assets, more assets in our state. And this is good for Alaska, it's good for America. And again, Admiral, thank you for being here. Thanks for your great attention to Alaska and America, and we really appreciate the partnership.
Well, thank you, Senator, and I want to thank the entire delegation from Alaska and the other overseers and appropriators for helping provide the support for the nation's Coast Guard. And we're an Arctic nation, we're a Pacific nation. The Coast Guard has operated in this state for over 150 years. So it is really a privilege to be here representing the men and women of the United States Coast Guard who operate 365, 24/7 in this state, literally around the globe, providing search and rescue work, but more importantly, protecting our national security, our economic prosperity, and creating presence on the water to counter presence of other nations. And there's been a number of reporting of some of the situations this summer where we've encountered both Russian ships and Chinese ships, and the U.S. Coast Guard is out there, presence with presence, countering some of that activity. Our search and rescue role is critical in this state. We were just talking to the team in Kotzebue. We've got 2 H-60s forward deployed out of Kodiak to ensure that we're able to save lives, whether it's the local community members, fishing fleet, others who are deriving their existence from operating on the water. Those crews are up there, they're excited, they're working with the search and rescue professionals who live and work in Kotzebue. It's a great partnership. I was really excited to see our helicopters up there. Again, appreciate all of the support of our overseers and particularly the congressional delegation from the state of Alaska. There is nothing but opportunity here in the state, here for the Coast Guard. And again, we're an Arctic nation. This is about our sovereignty, our security as a nation, and the U.S. Coast Guard is a key contributor to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Admiral. And you know, we don't have a lot of 4-star visitors here, so just take a look. It's very impressive for the military. So,
we can start with some questions. Steve, do you have a question? If I may, sir.
Yeah.
Last time I saw you, you were with some congressional members.
Yeah.
You were visiting North Slope. I was curious if you just give me an update on how that trip went up to the North Slope.
Trip went great. Yeah, thank you. It went really well. Look, these kind of trips, when we have members from the lower 48, congressional members, they come up and their eyes just are wide open because what they saw was a really, really impressive display of American energy produced at the highest standards in the world. It's really hard to explain to people. You know, some of the people are used to going to Texas or North Dakota, these places that frack, and they have a drill, rig every 30 yards, right? It's very different in Alaska. You got 1 or 2 big drill rigs, and that's it because of our extended reach. And we saw caribou and everything. The North Slope is not like any other place in the world in terms of the high environmental standards that we have and the professionalism of our workers. We're on one of the big Doyon rigs there, and I think they were really, really motivated to help us help America be an energy dominant country. So it was a great trip, and I think our colleagues from the lower 48 in Congress learned a lot, but I learned a lot. Governor learned a lot. Congresswoman Peltola came with it. I think she learned a lot. We all learn a lot when we do those trips.
If I may, a quick follow-up question. I heard you guys kind of say there's not a lot of optimism unless there's a change in the
Yeah. By the way, that was a very good question.
Okay. So do you guys kind of feel the same right now? Like there's not going to be a lot of change unless there's...
With the Coast Guard?
No, with the North Slope, with energy policies, restrictions.
Well, it's kind of best, it's kind of, we were at what was called GMT2, Greater Moose's 2, which is a big drill site. And right there is literally the road. There's a sign, the road to Willow. It says Willow. And we all and it's a road. And they're starting to build it. So on that, there's optimism, right? There's no doubt about it. We made that happen, as I mentioned. That was a reapproval of the record of decision the Trump administration had already made on Willow. The Biden administration narrowed that down, went from 5 pads to 3 pads. So that's the optimism. The pessimism is that after they did that, they said the entire NPRA, National Petroleum Reserve of Alaska, is now off the table. Well, A, I think that's completely illegal, but B, that's a whole nother area that the people on the North Slope and the people of Alaska want to be able to explore. So that's where there's pessimism. As you know, there's litigation going on. Pretty much the entire state of Alaska, North Slope Borough, other groups are suing the Biden administration for something that's almost certainly illegal. So it's optimism on Willow, pessimism on what they've done for the rest. And as you and I talked about, they have a requirement to do another lease sale on Anwar, and I think they're just going to completely violate the law.
Thank you. All right, Andrew, you have a question?
Yes. On the icebreaker, do you have a time frame or ideas to when that would be?
Did you hear that?
Yeah, you're talking about the commercially available icebreaker. So we have been authorized and appropriated the money to purchase a icebreaker that is currently in existence. We've put out a request for a proposal. We've just, over the last couple weeks, stepped into the beginnings of the negotiation for that icebreaker. And as we gain clarity on that, we'll have a better sense for timeline. I have a sense of urgency. We need to get that, we need to buy it. We need to get it painted red and a Coast Guard stripe on it, a Coast Guard crew, and we need to get it up here operating. It'll probably go back to where it is in the Gulf Coast for a couple of cycles as we continue to get it to full operating compliance and as we work to build out the pier and the utilities in Juneau. And happy to share that timeline, but we're still working to develop certainty ourselves. But it is coming, and it's coming to Juneau.
And in addition to the money that's been appropriated and the motivation you're seeing with the Coast Guard, in last year's Coast Guard bill, and again, the subcommittee I'm on, we write that bill. We got the land exchange that is between NOAA land that would come in Juneau that would go to the Coast Guard. So that was authorized in the Coast Guard bill, and that land exchange has already happened. So we're moving forward on the land that the Coast Guard needs in Juneau to build out the infrastructure. So things are moving forward, but having the Commandant come here and say, this is it, we're doing it, we're motivated, we got the money, which they do, that's a huge deal. So having her leadership drive it is important as anything, but we need that soon.
Eric? Yeah, I had a question sort of about, there's probably 190, 200 people that are going to be associated with that icebreaker in Juneau. Obviously, it's tough to find a place to live in Juneau right now. But can you talk about efforts to find places for all these Coast Guard personnel to live and to have their children cared for and things of that nature?
So this too is part of the conversation. When we talk about bringing a ship into a location, Juneau is what we're talking about here. It's a conversation we've been having. Sitka, Seward, Kodiak. We just toured all of the great new housing that we've gained support for in Kodiak to ensure that our Coast Guard crews and their families can integrate into the communities where we work and serve. So we've just focused on the ship, 1, 2, the pier and utilities, the maintainers, and we also need to consider what that crew looks like and how do we support them in Juneau. That too is part of the work as we move forward to understand how we successfully get that ship there. But we'll get the ship into Juneau and operating off of Juneau in advance of having all of that in place. And so, like I say, you may see it swing up for a couple operating cycles before it's permanently stationed there because of all of those pieces. But I know we have got the support of the Alaska delegation to help us do what we need to do to make sure that those crews are fully supported. And I will tell you, our Coast Guard crews and families living and working in Alaska love it. I've talked to many over the last week, and the number of them that are like, I've been here for 3 years, I would stay for another 3, I love Alaska, I don't want to leave. It's not always easy to get up here, and it's not easy to get back to the lower 48, but once we get them up here, they love being here.
And we love the Coast Guard too. Obviously, it's a mutual, love. But here's another thing that I think's the good news story. It's a great question. It's a really important question. If the Coast Guard puts that request in on housing, I'm the, like I said, on the authorizing committee. Senator Murkowski's on the appropriations committee, and we tag team to make that happen. The Commandant was just in Kodiak with Senator Murkowski, and they had put forward a lot of requests for new housing. And you're starting to see the new housing in Kodiak, and it is world class.
It is.
World class. And then here's the other good news. I was just in Juneau last week, going there primarily focused on the recovery from the major floods. But what's happening in Juneau is really important. The icebreaker is really unified everybody. You go to Juneau and you talk to people, there are very few people who don't want to see this icebreaker coming to Juneau. And the Coast Guard chose Juneau. The community in Juneau is really motivated, but you're starting to see the local leadership, the mayor, the city council, the borough, they know that they got to work with us, the delegation, the state, and the Coast Guard on housing. And they are already talking about housing. They're already looking at places to do additional housing. So this is a unified effort in terms of housing. It's local, it's state, it's borough, it's fed, it's military, So it's everybody, but the discussions I've had in Juneau, and there are many with our elected leaders there, they are motivated to help on that very important issue that you mentioned, housing.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
For the Commandant, as I said, I'm Andrew Kitcheman with the Alaska Beacon. Just anything, what was most striking for you in this trip? Anything that you learned in particular?
Yeah, so this is not my first opportunity to extensively travel through Alaska. As a junior officer, my first assignment was on the Polar Star. And so had an opportunity to visit Juneau, get up east of Utqiagvik, and so I've seen it from the water. As a 3-star commander 5 years ago, toured, have had the opportunity to visit Alaska. What strikes me about the work here, again, how critical it is, and how critical it is not just to the small communities where we live and work and serve. That search and rescue and life-saving work is so critical, but increasingly our impact on enforcing our own sovereignty and national security and national defense, whether it's enforcing our fisheries laws, or creating presence and meeting presence with presence. That demand and need has continued to grow, certainly in the 5 years since I first really began looking holistically at all that the Coast Guard does in Alaska. The men and women that serve here love being here. They are incredible, incredible members of the military and workforce, and I know they are up for the opportunities and the challenges ahead. And I just want to thank the Senator again and the entire delegation from Alaska for all they do to support our Coast Guard workforce. So thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Admiral. And you know, and when the Admiral's talking about presence meeting presence, you know, that's you know, we had a 3-ship Chinese naval task force here about 5 weeks ago. The Coast Guard was out there. They had a national security cutter. That is a giant ship. Looks like a Navy destroyer. Shadowing those guys. There was a Russian Navy ship just off our coast last week, right? We had assets on top of that. Those are Coast Guard assets. And those adversaries of ours, they understand one thing, American power, and that is represented by the Coast Guard, the Navy, the Air Force. So we love having them here. Thank you again, Admiral.
Thank you. Thanks,
Great
Senator.
trip. Okay, thank you.